Scott said in the video today is that he sat down with some people and said, "What the hell is this?" And it immediately occurred to me that if the men who wrote the Constitution and spent a desperately hot summer in Philadelphia doing it in secret because they were committing treason at the time, because they had been sent there to simply alter the Articles of Confederation, could have seen the state of California today, the EPA and the CARB combination, they might have said, "What the hell is this? What did we do? Why didn't we just go home and enjoy the coolness of our homes that summer?" I've thought that many times, but no more than the last few months. This isn't about truckers. It isn't about emissions. It's about control of lives. This is a predictable administrative move that has been predictable at least since 2012. Nobody likes to hear the word Agenda 21. Everybody believes when someone says that we've launched off into some kind of a conspiratorial netherland and we're making up stories that would never happen in America. But everything in the CARB program, everything in the EPA program that has become evident since 2012 is Agenda 21. And I ask any of you who don't believe that, don't take my word for it. Use your internet. You all use the internet, and enter Agenda 21 and find the right book, and you'll find the exact language that is used to justify what CARB is doing in California and what the EPA is doing throughout the nation. You know, Harry Truman was almost assassinated. And if he hadn't been in the Blair House instead of the White House on the day that the assassins shot up the House of Representatives, he would have been killed. John Kennedy was killed. Dwight Eisenhower was embarrassed by the shooting down of a flight that he had ordered not to take place. And Ronald Reagan was nearly assassinated. And each of those presidents had one thing in common. They did not believe in world government. They did not believe in loss of sovereignty of the United States. They did not believe in regulatory agency power. They believed in the free enterprise system. And that's a naughty word in America today. I told the county commissioners in Owyhee County years ago that when I retired, I wanted to go to China because I wanted to see the free enterprise system at work. And there are, in fact, 5 towns in China where the Chinese government allowed it to work. They told several companies, you build cities in the sites of those hovels, and we'll tax you, but we won't regulate you. And they are the 5 most modern cities in China today. And they manufacture 90% of the software that we sell on the East Coast. EPA has broken the law. They have not coordinated with any of the local governments represented on this board. As a matter of fact, to Redding, they admit it, and they say that they respectfully decline to. In words, because they're above the law. NEPA does not apply to them, even though the Congress and the Council on environmental quality say it does. They say they're not engaged in a major federal action, even though the law and the regulations say they are. They say that getting federal money doesn't turn them into a federal agency. No, it doesn't. But it turns their action into a major federal action, which is covered by NEPA. But they meet every test, not only taking federal money, but implementing a federal program and doing it in an instance that raises high conflict of interest and much dispute in the public. And those are the tests that have been set by the Congress and the Council on Environmental Quality. CARB is engaged in a major federal action, and I believe we've proved that. I believe we've proved that they have not coordinated with any of you. The President, in an executive order, ordered that he coordinate with the non-government organizations sitting on the board. And the Congress and the state of California have demanded that CARB coordinate with all of you, and NEPA demands that the EPA coordinate with all of you. And they are above the law. They literally are above the law until you make them obey that law. And nobody can do it but you now. The rest of your local officials can't do it because they won't come to you to coordinate on any demand. And so you have to force it. And that's what we're going to ask you to do in the proposed findings that we present to you. We're going to ask you to find that they have violated the law by not coordinating with you. We're going to ask you to find that the issues that they should have raised with you involve environmental justice, which we believe we've proved to you they have violated. Environmental justice is not only required by the federal law, but by the California law. We believe that they have violated California law by not coordinating, as well as the federal. The California Planning Act makes it very clear that the planning agency of the state of California is advisor to the governor and all of his cabinet members, and that they all have to coordinate with each other and with local government on all types of long-term planning. And if controlling transportation in California isn't long-term planning, then what is? CARB has not done an economic analysis, obviously. And if that isn't proven by anything else, it is proven by raise your rates. CARB has done no social analysis, no cultural analysis. The EPA has violated the Data Quality Act because, as you've heard from the scientists, there is no scientific proof for what they claim. So they've violated the Data Quality Act. They've violated the Regulatory Flexibility Act, because before they issue any rule or before they give money to CARB to issue any rule, they must, under law, consider any adverse impact that that rule will have on any unit of government less than 50,000 population. Now, how many of you represent a unity of government of 50,000 or more? One local official. So everybody else, they should have checked to see what the adverse impact would be on your county or your city. And why have they not? Because nothing could get done in Washington on the Washington scale if they did that. Because there is adverse impact. And that's why the federal law was written as it was in 1976. They violated the Interstate Commerce Clause, and we've proven that. The Constitution says that no state can burden interstate commerce. It is a burden to truckers in Oregon when they can't come into California because of the elements of the CARB program. It's a burden on interstate commerce when trucks have to go to a switching station in Nevada and change. It's a burden on California, a burden on interstate commerce when a fine of $345,000 is imposed on the manufacturer of garden tools because he imported them into California and they don't carry the certification of CARB. And that's in one of the exhibits that we're going to give you. $345,000 fine. And that follows an opinion by the Inspector General of EPA who criticized CARB for not imposing heavy enough fines and saying that fines must be punitive. They must be big enough to be punitive, to punish people in order to get them to follow the law. And so for lawnmowers and rakes and hoes that weren't certified by CARB, a $345,000 fine was imposed. Tammy talked about that $8 million grant that came in the name of railroads. The Inspector General of EPA recalled that money. Now, it never got sent back, but he recalled it and criticized CARB because they didn't destroy the locomotives fast enough. He said they were very ineffective in not destroying those locomotives. That was what the railroad money was for, was to destroy locomotives. The President, when he announced his support of the Diesel Emission Act, said that he wanted the program in California that EPA would promote to be made so that it could apply nationally. Now, when he did that, he violated the law. Federal aviation law requires that nobody attempt, except through that act, to set rates on interstate transportation. And so when they apply the Clean Air Act to affect rates, to affect the flow of transportation interstate, they've used one federal act in conflict and in violation with another. They violated the law of due process. From the beginning, you can't issue a regulation without substantial evidence. The courts have said that for 125 years. It's not new. It's not anything that Mary Nichols doesn't know. It's not anything that President Obama doesn't know, and it's not anything that the wonderfully lack of memory honored McCarthy doesn't know. When she testified not too long ago that she really had no information at all about human experiments being conducted by our agency. They've all known it. Due process has been violated not only in respect to the issuance of this regulation, but it's been violated by EPA putting CARB in the position to issue this regulation with the full intent of making it national. They have already told the other states, you have a choice. You can apply our rule or you can apply the California rule. The EPA did that 3 weeks ago. So without science on either end, the nation has already been subjected to this. Economic freedom, where are the people? Where are the people in the streets saying we've lost it? That's unfortunately the apathy of today. It's the apathy of mass media that doesn't cover these things. It's the apathy that comes from people working hard and going home at night and watching something enjoyable like Alaska Bush People, which I thoroughly enjoy, or The Big Bang Theory, something you can laugh at instead of worrying about where your next dollar is coming from. You can't tell these stories in 3 sound bites, and that's what television's about today, and that's what radio's about today, the 3 sound bites. And so they get away with due process violations. The most specific due process violation that we're going to ask you to find, that has been proven here, is the way CARB changes its regulations. And if you can find the change on their website, you know it. And if you can't, you don't. And for 146 years, the United States Supreme Court has said that you cannot hold somebody responsible and fine them for violating a rule that they don't know for certain ahead of time. They have to know what it is they're doing wrong. You can't do that under the system that we've heard here and that will be shown in the written exhibits that we hand to you. CARB has had, as I said, the $8 million recalled, but somehow it never got recalled. CARB has had $99,000 recalled by the Inspector General of EPA for misspending, for spending for things that were not authorized by California or federal law. That didn't get recalled. And then finally, in what I think is probably one of the worst violations that I've seen since I began to understand what America was about, is the absolute knowing violation of the Nuremberg Code, the California laws restricting experimentation on humans, the California law that absolutely prohibits experimentation on children, prohibits it, the EPA rule that specifically prohibits, not limits, experiments on children. And we find evidence that the EPA paid the University of Southern California and UCLA fine schools with fine reputations to perform human experiments on children in violation of the law. In violation, if you will, of the constitutional rights of those kids. And how did they get them to do it? They paid them $20 per visit to the clinic. And they managed to get them there enough that it was giving them some spending money. They paid the humans in North Carolina and the other schools $12 an hour. And one of the exhibits that we will give you shows how they got those people to come in and add, "Would you like to lose weight?" Another ad, "Would you like to be sure that you can better your asthmatic condition? And if so, apply." In one of the consent advices that was given, the worst thing that was mentioned was that the person might get a bad cold. And yet at the same time, the EPA and CARB are telling the people, the Congress, and the California legislature that any assimilation of even a particle of that soot can kill you. Now, what we're going to ask you to do is to find on those issues, and then we're going to suggest to you some things to do with your decision. And one of them is to ask the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office to investigate the University of Southern California, the University of California at Los Angeles, and those doctors who were involved in the experiments. They said, and so did EPA, that they ended those experiments in 2006, and we're going to present documents to you from them admitting that they went on to 2010, 4 years after they told the Congress they had ended. We're going to ask you also to send your decision to the District Attorney of Sacramento County to investigate the violations of law by the members of CARB and their czar. We're going to ask you to send your decision to the Attorney General of California, who did such a magnificent job as the DA in San Francisco before she was elected to the job of Attorney General, in causing thousands of drug cases to be thrown out because of the way she managed her office. And we're going to ask you to send your decision to the Inspector General of EPA and to the Attorney General of the United States. Now, do we expect anything to come out of that? No, except one thing. To show those folks that at least you know that the law is being violated under their very noses. More productively, we're going to ask you to send your decision to the 3 Appropriations Committee in the Congress, particularly to Representative Mike Simpson of Idaho, who is on the Subcommittee on Appropriations for EPA. He has announced for years his love for the EPA and waiting for the opportunity to have some reason to cut their funding by 40%. And I believe that we can give him that reason. Now, that won't happen, but hopefully he will be able to get into an appropriations bill the elimination of funding to implement the diesel emission rule in California, and to cut off funding through grants or any other means to CARB. There are other things we'll ask you to do with your decision, but one of the things that I hope, and I think Mr. Peterson hopes, is that somehow we can raise the money to take this case either into the Northern District of California, into the district court, and ask for an injunction. And that is a court that has held before that the United States does have an obligation to coordinate, and if they don't, their action is thrown out. And if we find, after examining the judges who are sitting there now, that it's necessary that we go to the District of Columbia, where, as strange as it may seem, the judges believe that the rules in the law ought to be applied. And most often, a decision that goes against an agency for violating rules in the law come from the District of Columbia. And it takes money to do that. Nobody can do that for free. If we can raise the funds, we're going to recommend that some of you be ready to have your local governments and your organizations back that complaint and put your names on it so that we can go and ask for that injunction. This is a war on rural America, and that's an advertisement for the book that I'm about finished with. I started it 8 years ago, and I got to finish it soon. If you look at everything that has happened in this nation from Washington, D.C., since the year 2000, it has been an attack on rural America, on our agriculture, on our grazing, now on our transportation. The NAFTA superhighway, which I am very glad I had part in stopping the first leg of in Texas, would have eliminated all United States customs between Mexico and Canada. I had a history professor at the College of Idaho who said there were three things that made this nation great. One is that we were too broad for anybody to get to our interior and make us fight two wars, one on the west side and one on the east side of our nation. And that has caused the decline and fall of many European countries through the years. And the second was that we could feed our armies and we could feed ourselves, that we didn't have to bring food from somewhere else that could be cut off by an enemy. And third was that we could convert our manufacturing overnight to produce all the military equipment we needed. Well, if you saw those pictures on TV the other night of Detroit, you know where our manufacturing has gone. Our agriculture is under such attack that the EPA dust rule will put every dry land farmer out of business in the Middle West. And even though it's a small thing, there's no pineapple produced in the United States anymore. The last pineapple plantation closed last year by government order because of some peculiarity that EPA found. And now that plant even moved from the territory of Guam, so we don't produce that anymore. And without customs, anywhere along that NAFTA superhighway, which I can show you on a map, started at a port owned and built by China on the Mexican coast, going all the way to Canada. What does that do to the interior of the country? This is a war on rural America, and you have the opportunity, and I think we've made the record that gives you the opportunity to take one of the first steps toward winning that war in California. Make no mistake, we're here because of Californians, but this is not just a California battle. It's a battle for America. And when you finish your job with whatever you do with the findings that we propose to you, I hope that you won't have to say, as the founders would say if they were here today, what the hell is this? Because it is your opportunity to take the first strike. And we don't want to miss the ball on the first strike. Keep in mind one of my favorite lines by one of my favorite people, Yogi Berra. He went to the plate as a pinch hitter, and MacPhail was the manager, and he told him to go up there, son, and think now, because Yogi was a terrible, terrible bad ball swinger. He loved to swing at the ball within the ground or over his head. Go up there and think. Yogi went up and swung on 3 bad pitches and struck out. And when he came back to the dugout, the manager was waiting for him. And he says, "Gosh, Mr. MacPhail, I can't do 2 things at once." And MacPhail said he never asked him to think again. Well, when you get those findings, we're going to ask you to do 2 things at once. Think about what your decision is and what its impact is here. Think about what its impact is going to be on the entire United States of America. For Mr. Peterson, I thank you for your attention. I'm going to ask the hearing officer and the court reporter to allow us to present the written exhibits within the next week because they have changed as we've heard testimony. I would ask, Mr. Hearing Officer, that with the permission of the board, the record be closed a week from today, and we'll have all those exhibits in by then.
That's fine with me. Any objections?
Thank you.
Well, we thank you, Mr. Grant. We thank you, Mr. Peterson. We thank the witnesses, and we thank everybody for coming.